Welcome to the Regenerative Brands podcast. This is a place for consumers, operators, and investors to learn about the consumer brands supporting regenerative agriculture and how they're changing the world. This is your host, Kyle, joined by my co-host, AC, who's going to take us into the episode.
On this episode, we have Christian Ebersol and Nick Wallace of 99 Counties. Christian serves as a co-founder and CEO, while Nick is also a co-founder and the chief farmer. 99 Counties is supporting regenerative agriculture with its direct-to-consumer e-commerce business that partners with small family farms in Iowa and sells a myriad of regeneratively raised meat products to people in all of the lower 48 states. In this episode, we talk about Nick's personal journey that led him to the creation of Wallace Farms, his vision to regenerate the 99 counties of Iowa, and how crossing paths with Christian led him to turn his direct-to-consumer single-farm business into a venture-backed brand aggregating from farmers across the entire state and servicing customers across the nation. If you're ready to feel something, then you've come to the right place. We had great tactical wisdom as usual, but also really dug into the deep societal imperative around shifting our agricultural systems. 99 Counties is truly on the front lines as Iowa is ground zero for degenerative agriculture that is driving countless human and planetary health issues. Among the 50 states, Iowa ranks dead last in soil erosion rates, second to last in ecosystem impacts, fourth to last in conservation practices, fifth highest rate of water nutrient runoff, seventh highest incidence of cancer, and has the 11th highest obesity rate. What more needs to be said? Let's dive in. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Regen Brands podcast. Very excited today to have our friends Christian and Nick from 99 Counties. So welcome, fellas.
Thanks for having us. Great to be here.
Awesome. Yep, no doubt.
We're super stoked. Quick heads up to all the listeners. This has been prefaced as a gloves off episode. There may or may not be a little bit more swearing than some previous episodes. I just want to set the tone now to make sure we're all on the same page. So, Nick, Christian, give our audience a quick lay of the land. So what does 99 Counties produce in terms of, animal products? What are the SKUs? Where can people find your stuff today?
Awesome. Thank you. And a quick note on the name. There are 99 counties in the great state of Iowa, and it is our mission to transform those to be regenerative. And we believe Iowa is ground zero for kind of fixing everything in agriculture. We sell regenerative meat direct to consumer. If you live anywhere in the lower 48 states, you can get the most delicious, regeneratively raised, grass-fed, grass-finished beef, pastured pork, chicken, turkey, soon to be lamb, all sourced from small family farms in Iowa. We also have a new meat stick product. Nick is like this creative genius when it comes to those products. There's a hot honey pork, there's a honey pork, there's a sugar-free beef. They're really great. So it's interesting. Like if you're in Iowa or Illinois, we deliver to your doorstep like the milkman used to with the meat. And then if you're elsewhere in the lower 48, we will ship to you. And then of course we also have the meat stick product that eventually will be omni-channel.
Oh yeah.
Love it. And, I think this is a really cool story because it's the evolution of really Nick's Farms direct-to-consumer business and now serving more customers and sourcing from more farmers. So, Nick, just take us back, man. How did this all get started? I know there's some very personal pieces, so we'd love to hear that story.
Yeah, I will. If you allow me, I'll take you on a little story. I've been doing this. I'm 46. I've been doing this for a little more than 20 years now. So I can't believe that it's been that long, but here we are.
Yeah.
So my dad, I grew up in a small farming community in Northeast Iowa called Strawberry Point. My dad was a commodity farmer in the 80s, had a bunch of awesome cows, maybe 400 acres. And then the farm crisis hit, right? Interest rates went from 6% to 22% in less than 2 years. Not a lot of farmers made it. My dad had to find a new career. He stayed in farming, right? So he was working for a grass seed company called Barenbrug. They're one of the largest grass seed companies in the world. They work with a lot of organic farmers. He came back from Oregon, and I was playing baseball out there too, and came back to Iowa and started this company for them in the Midwest territory. So he went up to, this was shortly after I had cancer and I went through chemo and, almost died, right? Yep. Playing college sports, I was a pitcher and couldn't heal anymore in between starts. So, This was shortly after that. Dad goes up to the Acres USA conference in Minneapolis.
Yeah.
He had a trade booth there, and he was listening to Ray Hewitt Tree Range, and he was listening to some other great speakers. He saw Sally Fallon speak with the Weston A. Price Foundation. The Oiling of America she was on this tour to educate people like, hey, we don't realize we are being poisoned by our food. Food nutrient density is gone. All the things that the Weston A. Price Foundation was about. Dad comes home, calls a family meeting. Everybody sit down. We are going to change the way this family looks at food. Nick, you had cancer because of chemicals, and the food system had changed. You went, from scratch cooking here at home. You went off to college. You were stressed out, and he said, "This is good. This is going to stop." So, he had a good friend who was raising grass-fed beef in southern Minnesota. Doug Gunnick was his name. Bless his soul. He passed away in a farm accident some years ago. We started to sell. Dad's like, "Hey, grass-fed beef's going to be everywhere in 10 years. This is the future." Yeah. About the time Power Steer came out, the article from Pollen in New York Times. Okay. And it was just like we had a revelation. We're like, we're going to get into the food
what
space.
year is this?
I was about to say, what year is this?
This was 99, 2000.
Okay.
26 years ago. Okay. So we pivot. We're like, hey, and I'm done with college. Go to Chicago. I'm an insurance broker. Hate it. I go out to Colorado up in the mountains, and I do a culinary program, European style apprenticeship.
Wow.
About the same time that we start Wallace Farms. And that's we're going to just sell grass-fed beef to people. People don't even know what grass-fed beef is in 2003.
Wow.
And my sister-in-law is in Chicago, and she's trying to, she's got a few customers. Websites just started to be a thing.
Yeah.
So
super early. It
was early. So I'm in culinary school, but not happy because, it's just there's, not enough money. And my tuning fork was off. So I moved back to Iowa with youngest kid, no family. And everybody in the family is like, hey, you have nothing going on. Why don't you see if you can do Wallace Farms? Right? Pretty much like you're at rock bottom, So they're like, why don't you see what you can make of this? Because we think it's going to be a thing. So I start going to farmers markets in Des Moines. I'm reading all of Joel Salatin's stuff. Just all his books were absorbed in a matter of, a month. And he has these metropolitan buying clubs. So I'm like, that's what I'm going to do. So I I grab as many email lists I can. I go to all the health fairs. I'm going to farmers markets, and I'm starting this business one box at a time. So flash forward, over the course of a decade, we went from, 12,000 in sales to 1.2 million in sales off the back of the truck. And I'm packing orders and driving and doing chores because at that time, we had a Century family farm. We started to transition, so it wasn't just our friend's farm. And then I'm bringing a coalition of all these farmers in and around me, right? Yeah. And then I created a snack stick company in there that really went crazy, and we did $4 million in sales in snack sticks in a matter of 5 years. So it was just this roller coaster of just straight up, right? And we blasted right through 2008 being a horrible, financial. We did nothing but grow when we shouldn't have, because we were at the right place at the right time with the right product, right? We were trailblazing. It was us, Thousand Hills Cattle Company, U.S. Wellness at John Wood. It was, some of the other people across the country were attaching themselves to this need. But I hit a plateau about 2016, maybe 17. Sales finally went flat. And what happened was I got outflanked by the grocery stores and the big corporations. JBS started getting in. And so grocery stores started to carry the label of grass-fed beef, right? Mm-hmm. So people weren't able to come out on a Saturday morning to meet me at the truck to buy their, meat. There were other reasons too, but it was just that was the first time I looked at Wallace Farms and I said, what are we doing? What are we trying to accomplish? And my dad's goal has always been to change agriculture, right? And that's just part of our family ethos is we need to turn Iowa back into grass. And that's not going to happen. But what if we could turn 25% of Iowa back into forage chain or 50%? right? So I'll circle the story back, which is kind of crazy. I'm really feeling deflated. This is about 4 years ago. And Dad's like, hey, Acres is back in Minneapolis. Why don't Mom and I are going? Why don't you come up with us? You stay in our hotel room and just come up and there's a few people you probably want to see. So I look at who's at the Acres conference. Zach Bush is the keynote, and I'm a huge Zach Bush guy. I mean, the guy's. I'm not sure he's even human. And just spoke to me because I had cancer, right? And he was designing chemo drug. His whole story, triple board certified. And I listened to some of his Rich Roll podcasts early, and it was like, all right, I'm in.
Same.
So he was up there, and then I befriended David Leon with Farmer's Footprint. He's directing that. David was going to be up there, and then Matt Egg was just on the scene, and Brandon was going to be up there, and then Rahe with Tree Range was going to do a thing. So I'm like, I have 4 things going up there for.
Let's go.
Yep. So I'm driving up there, and I'm like, I don't see any animals outside. I don't. Is this like I was pissed going up there. So I have a great couple 2-3 days, whatever it was. You know how you get your cup refilled, and had like a little tiny group dinner with Zach and some other people and Brandon and David, and it just kicking around, right? And saw Rahe speak with Tree Range, and the Rahe piece like really stuck in my mind. So I'm driving 3.5 hours south of Acres, which is ironically where this all started for my dad with Sally Fallon and the Wise Traditions. So I'm driving home and I'm like, man, what if we could do a tree range in every county? And what if we could just get one beef producer to do 50 head? And what if we could get one pork guy just to do 100 head, right? So then I'm like, all right, each county. And I grew up in Iowa, and I hadn't, I'd been here back for a few years, and I thought, I don't even know how many counties are in Iowa. I asked Google how many counties are in Iowa.
I'd have to do the same thing for Indiana, so I'm right there with you. I don't even know. Right?
So the 99 counties pops up, and I'm like, my marketing was like, oh shit, that's the name.
Wow.
Like we got it. That's it. That's a cool name. They have the 1% for the people or the 1% elites. Like, like we need the food for the 99%, right? Like this is the movement. So 3 hours later, I'm writing on papers on my console as I'm driving, like, okay, 50 times 4,000 head of beef, and right?
Safety first.
That's when that's when you know it's rolling, dude. That's great. Oh,
it was awesome. Good. So I get home and I've established a $500 million business by the time I get home. And I'm like, this isn't even hard because it's not even that much farmers. I don't even need that much. Yeah. All that I need now are customers. And I'm like, well, who wouldn't sign up for $150 a month? Not even all their groceries, not even all their calories. Yeah. It's just $150 a month times 10,000. And then you add a zero. And then you have Willie Nelson go online and you do like the Chipotle commercial. You just need like Willie or James Earl Jones to narrate this thing, and then you got 1 million people that are giving you $100, and then you take that times 12 months, and it's like, we just changed Iowa. I changed Iowa on the way home.
Yeah.
So it was Zach Bush and Rahe at Tree Range and Brandon and David, and it was like, it's on. So I did that. I came home. I started gathering my friends at Practical Farmers of Iowa, Wendy Johnson and Megan and Caleb. And then this is where Christian can tell his part of the story. But that is like that to me. And I'm a big like woo, like hippie, like energy guy. And that was like law of attraction, and the synchronicity was like,
it's real, brother.
Of course it needed to happen like that.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's awesome, man.
So Christian finds me.
I get emotional just hearing the story, and I've heard this story so many times. Now that's the best version Nick's given, seriously. And it's like, I've only been along for this ride kind of 2.5 years, and I mean with Nick, it's just like it's just such a privilege to be a part of it. So, I grew up in a small town in Connecticut. Used to be the dairy capital of America before this thing called Wisconsin happened. But I didn't have a farming background whatsoever. History major in college, investment banker later on, etc. long story short, a couple years ago, I was working in San Francisco. I transitioned from like finance, venture capital to working at a startup. California's on fire, like literally fires, droughts, etc. So I'm like, you know what? Like, I'm tired of selling insurance online, which is basically what I was doing. And I really want to work in climate change and like make a positive difference in the world. And so I was fortunate enough to spend a year working for a venture capital firm as an entrepreneur in residence. My timing was really lucky. Like I left this other job and explored this whole starting a company thing when climate was really, really hot. This is during the year of 2020 that I had this, that I kind of pitched spending the year of 2021 doing this. So 2021, I start off the year, I'm researching solar panels. I'm like looking around San Francisco. I'm like, wow, why does every house not have a solar panel on it? Then I'm like looking at electric vehicles. And at one point I'm looking at direct air capture. And I'm like, wow, this is so cool. These companies are sucking carbon out of the air with fans and like putting it underground. Brilliant. But then I'm like, man, it is expensive from an energy standpoint to like suck carbon out of the air. So I'm listening to a book on tape on Audible called Animal Vegetable Junk by Mark Bittman on February 28th of 2021. And it hits me. There's this thing called soil carbon sequestration. And I'm like, oh my gosh, all my peers on the coasts are out of their minds. Like there are these things called plants that naturally consume carbon and put it in the ground. Like, holy moly, like we got to look at this. So I do a bunch of academic research. I call Gabe Brown, like all the typical stuff you would do, which by the way is easy because the number of us that are big enough nerds to like call Gabe Brown or whatever is not that many. So it's like not that hard. Like the regenerative community is actually like totally open and willing to connect. So then I'm like, okay, well, unfortunately by background, I'm a coastal elite. I grew up in Connecticut. I'm in San Francisco. But I remember going to have a prayer of like doing anything in this community. I've got to find someone who comes from this world and I need to get out there and actually understand, what farming is. So I rent a pickup truck in Helena, Montana. And I spend like a month driving across the country, I mean, just hitting all these like incredible people in the community. I visit Jonathan Lundgren's farm. I go to Lauren Steinlage's daughter's wedding, which he was kind enough to invite me to. I actually, at one point, met David Brandt. May he rest in peace. Who's a fascinating person in this community. Anyway, drive through Iowa. I stop and I have afternoon kind of water at Sarah Carlson of Practical Farmers of Iowa's house in Des Moines. And I'm talking about, man, rotational grazing and cattle. Like that's what she's like, you have got to meet Nick Wallace of 99 Counties. Like, what he's doing is so cool. Yeah. And so she ends up connecting me to Nick. Initially, I'm like, oh my God, I see Nick's video in his loft where he's got a map of Iowa behind it with 99 counties. And I'm like, wow, like this guy's got to figure out, man, this guy's going to be so successful. God, I wish I had that idea. Yeah. And then Nick and I start talking. I make him do like 5 million Zooms. He's now the world's biggest fan of Zoom. And we realized that like the two of us together have complementary skill sets and we should do this. So we ended up raising some capital at the start of 2022. And it's like, I mean, it's been basically almost 2 years since we incorporated the business. Sometimes it feels like 2 months. Sometimes it feels like 20 years. And fast forward to today, we've worked with over 26 farmers in Iowa over the last 2 years. We have this incredible website, these products, this incredible new meat stick product that Nick built. And we're growing, honestly, not as fast as we would like, but it's all there for the taking. Like there's so much opportunity. And I just had the privilege to spend a week biking across the entire state of Iowa through the RAGBRAI. And it reminds me of like all we have to save, as we'll tell you, Iowa is 90% corn and soybeans. And that's not feeding people and it's having a lot of negative impacts on the land. And with just enough consumers that want to do what Nick said and spend $150 a month with us to get great meat that's great for the health, we can really make a difference in Iowa and ultimately the world.
Man, there's
I got
so
so
much
many
to unpack.
comments.
There's so much to unpack with the origin story. With the way you two met, with like the mothership energy of bringing people together. There also seems to be like this sort of like, AC, I don't know if you thought about this at all or not, but it feels almost similar to how you and I met in terms of, my health journey, my passion, your sort of financial background, complementary skill sets. So there's a lot to unpack here. One of the things I want to make sure we give a shout out to is Nick's list of essentially regenerative rock stars that influenced him, and like he was able to be inspired by and learn from. I thought that was really cool. I guess what I think would be really important to talk about is some of the why. And, you know, Iowa in particular is a super heavy agricultural state. And as we all know, heavy in the utilization of pesticides, herbicides, synthetic fertilizers, etc. So let's talk a little bit about why Iowa is so important to you two and why that's such a unique place to really like be pushing regen forward. So I don't know how you want to tackle that or approach that. Maybe we start with some of the problems with agriculture and the effects those have on the general population. Nick, I know that's near and dear to your heart. So if you want to like unveil some of that information, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, this, man, I tell you, I'll start with how bad it is. And this is when Christian and I we're doing RAGBRAI, which is that bicycle ride across Iowa. You know, it's like 50,000 people. I found myself really, this is where we need to go. We are all adults that are ignoring the problem, and we're not asking why. Okay. So Iowa is now 49 out of 50 for cancer rates. 49 out of 50. I'm not sure who the unlucky 50 is. Doesn't matter. We're 46 out of 50 for obesity. Kids now, I think 60% have autoimmune diseases. We are failing our children like miserably. And yet we have those rates and maybe it's genetic. Maybe it's, there must be a reason, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Iowa sprays more chemicals than any other state. Maybe you could argue like California with all the, the valleys, but I would say as a whole, 98% of Iowa's corn and soybeans, triple stack technology. And all I see in the spring are sprayers hitting everything for a month and a half. And then all I see in June are airplanes and helicopters. Look, it's like freaking apocalypse now. Like, the smell of napalm in the morning. It's just a bombardment of chemicals. And cancer rates at 49 out of 50. The adults in the room need to step up and say, why is this? And those who refuse to talk about it, those maybe potential corporations and politicians, maybe need to retire and step aside. And because guess what? Someday our children, if we ever get this figured out or we really come to the truth, they're going to go, what in the F were you doing?
Yeah.
You should be embarrassed. And so I have a 14, a 10, and a 7-year-old. And I will be damned if I'm going to sit in there and when they get chemotherapy when they're 20 years old. Right? And I'll say the last thing I'll put on this, and I've taken this out of my slides. I do some of these dinners where we get 100 people in a room. We feed them, like we inspire them.
Yeah.
The slide I took out that I'm going to bring up to you right now is in the University of Iowa, hospitals and clinics, right? That's a huge, like famous, system. Not famous, it's a teaching hospital that's like really well known. It sits right across the street from my beloved Kinnick Stadium where the University of Iowa Hawkeyes play. Yeah. We got a pretty awesome football team, a really good defense, right?
I unfortunately got my ass kicked pretty good in that stadium, so we'll leave that for another time.
Oh,
yes.
Where were you playing?
Indiana.
Yeah, we usually smoke Indiana pretty good. So I don't know if you've paid attention to the children's hospital built across the street.
Yeah.
And we have now I'm gonna say this is like a 30, 40 story beautiful glass building that overlooks the stadium. And at the end of every quarter, all the fans stop and they wave to the sick kids that are on the top floor watching the game, right? I mean, bless all the kids in there and the workers and those that are trying to save those kids' lives, right? But you have to ask yourself, why is that building there? It's not all broken arms and, surgery, things accidents that happen to kids,
it's not
right?
Acute problems.
That is an autoimmune deficiency building. And essentially what we're doing is giving tribute to that system. And so it's, it's just sad. And I take that out because you could imagine some of the reaction that people would give me if I'm not demonizing the people and the people that have the love and that are fighting for their lives and that I'm giving tribute to. What I'm saying is, why the F is that building there? So I think we need to look at ourselves pretty intensely in the mirror and being honest and saying we're failing miserably because crony capitalism has deeply rooted itself in Iowa post World War II. That war machine came back and it's gotten a stranglehold, and it's not the farmers' fault because they've been incentivized. We can get into that too, but those are just my thoughts right now.
Yeah, we'll put a pin in that one. We're going to come back to that one.
Yeah.
I'll add something to that quickly that I think speaks to part of the challenge we're all trying to solve here. During this Ragbri week, we were in all these awesome towns, and one of the towns we were in at one point we had a Pop-A-Shot thing that Nick was doing. Nick was a star high school basketball player. No one can beat this guy in Pop-A-Shot. And all these kids would be there, and there was this mom there from the town. And I was talking to her and learning about her, and it turns out they were going later that day to see their dad, who was flying the crop duster plane. I mean, by the way, for people like me from Connecticut, California, like crop dusters are like in movies, and then you're in Iowa and they're like all over the place. You're like, this still exists. Anyway, this lovely woman, her husband, he flies a crop duster plane. That's his livelihood. That's his business. He's got a lovely family that he cares about and he needs to put food on the table for them. Candidly, that crop duster's causing cancer. That crop duster's awful. But, it's not going to work overnight to just put that individual out of a job. Same thing with the ethanol plants that I'm very against. And so, Nick, and I think the solution is grassroots from the ground up. As 99 counties grows, more and more farmers change from doing chemical agriculture to doing regenerative agriculture because we've created a market for that. And that way we're easing into it over time, and we're not, honestly, like if I were the head of the EPA or the USDA for a day, I would get rid of all the subsidies and I'd say, let's change this thing right away. But what's going to be more humanistic and better for people is if people like us, the other folks you've had on your podcast, just succeed quickly but gradually over time, and it'll just be a market pull that will pull more and more of those acres into a form of agriculture that is better for people's health, better for the communities, and results in this more regenerative world.
Let's just put some fish emulsion in that plane. Spray that. It can smell like fish for a couple weeks in the summer, right? I mean, he can still do his job. Let's just spray biologicals. So, but yeah.
It makes sense. And guys, I super appreciate the why. Nick, Christian, I don't know if you know, I also was diagnosed with cancer at an early age. It was my 31st birthday. So I've been in the chemo rooms, I've had the surgeries, and I feel the passion and the authenticity, Nick, with what you're talking about. And you're absolutely right. It's a systemic issue. And I think that's one of the hardest things about trying to fight this industrial machine is that there's not necessarily a single villain. It's a byproduct of capitalism in the post-World War II agricultural era. So it's really hard to point the finger and say, we're going to fight this war against, this person, or this one chemical is bad, or, it's a whole systemic problem, which is significantly more complicated to try to change. Also, I meant to mention this earlier. One of the things we talk about on a lot of the podcasts is people's first indoctrination moment into regenerative. And you guys both touched on that earlier. So I want to call that out. Like the Zach Bush Rich Roll podcast. Christian, I can't remember what you were listening to, but there's this moment where these, to use your words, Christian, these regenerative nerds, myself included, first really understand the concept and the power of regenerative agriculture. And they're like, holy shit, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. There's so much potential if we can get more people to understand and support this system of food from both a climate perspective and a health perspective. So I'm just trying to appreciate everything you guys are sharing and saying that we are very much on the same page, and super stoked to have you on the pod. Yeah, I want to pivot a little bit more into the brand side. Actually, AC, I'll let you take some questions because I'm 2 in a row now. You go ahead.
Yeah, no, you're picking up what my brain's telling you. I want to get tactical on the brand side. I want to ask one last macro question because now is the time to ask it. And I want to follow it up with some more tactical questions around the brand, the business, et cetera. But the last macro question is really, I think we firmly believe, and we see through the White Oak Pastures of the world and all the people we could name, that there clearly is a difference made when we can create consumer demand through these brands and through these businesses, like for these products that increase supply, right? Increase the incentives for the farmers. I think the problem in the Midwest, being from the Midwest as well, is like corn and soybeans is the problem. And like y'all are in ground zero for that. And it still is super hard to get Farmer Joe, Farmer Sally to like do regenerative, rotated, grass-fed, grass-finished beef versus GMO corn, sprayed, etc. Right? Like, so Nick, my question for you is like either high level or tactical. Like, how do we actually let's give the incentives, right? Let's say the incentives are there. Let's say the market's there. Like, how do we actually get people to turn, like, to reperennialize these systems, to turn Iowa back into an oak filled savanna versus monocrop corn and soybean?
Well, you said the money's there. I would say the hard answer and the easy answer are the same. It sounds too simple. It's just about money. I mean, and I don't say that by demonizing the farmer, because they're spending everything they make. I mean, it's not like anybody's getting rich. Now, there's some big farmers getting rich, right? But that's not normally the case. People are just trying to make a living and doing the right thing, and they've been pushed into the system. And the hard part of that is, do we think the government would take? I don't know how much. I always dream about how much money it would take and how many years. But imagine you just said, we're going to print $1 trillion, and it's going to be 10 years, and we're going to say these chemicals potentially are harmful. $1 trillion, 10 years. You better figure it out. And guess what? John Deere's going to get to work. They're already figuring it out with like lasers. How do you just send a machine through the field and AI recognizes every weed and lasers the tissue, and there's no more weeds? John Deere and all those engineers could figure it out. Same thing with all those industries. They could figure it out. They can figure it out, no problem. But it's moving the machine towards that way. It could just be a beautiful machine instead of a machine that poisons. But I mean, to me, it's money, right? But that only solves one issue. Okay, so now we have all these farmers in Iowa that are growing real food that's clean and nutrient dense. You have to have somebody buy that food, right? But you have to have customers that can afford it and are driven emotionally or physically, or are being told by their doctor or being told by an influencer that why would you not buy this food? Yeah. And it can't be 2x or 3x what their current Costco haul is, or Sam's Club, or we have Hy-Vees here, whatever that is. So it just comes down to money. Now, that's not to say we can't have a tipping point and we get to 2 or 3 or 4% or 5 or 10, and then it starts to turn that machine. That's probably likely what will happen, because we can get to scale, and then we can get into impact investors, like understanding there's a long road here. But I don't know if that completely answers your question, but it's unfortunately a monetary thing on both sides, and maybe in the middle too.
No, I think you're right. I think the incentives are really going to be the big piece here. And right now, the government is incentivizing people to grow non-nutrient dense monocrop food. And at the same time, like, those people are getting sick, and then the government's spending a bunch of money trying to save their lives via healthcare, right? And they're not trying to treat the issues. They're trying to, I shouldn't say, they're not trying to prevent the sickness. They're trying to treat the problem. And I can't remember what the stat is, but there's something like, if the GDP, if the United States continues to spend on healthcare at the same rate we're spending now, we'll be bankrupt in 20 years. Yeah. It really, to me, doesn't feel like medicine is the answer. If you think about how much money goes to finding the cure for cancer, I've been hearing about it my whole life. Nobody still has found the cure. It's all about finding the treatment, and instead, to your point, Nick, if we can reinvest some of those dollars towards preventing sickness in the first place, I think it does a ton of incredible work for the populace. Mark Hyman talks about it in his book, Food Fix, and how much human manpower potential we are wasting on having a sick populace. And just think about the productivity of the country if people were no longer sick. It's incredible to think about that potential power.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've hit on it. I would just add, Kyle, that, the canonical example we like to use often is if you look at personal expenditures on a household level over time, right around the time of World War II, the average U.S. household spent about 17% of their money on food. Today, we're closer to 8%. Where did that money go? It all went to healthcare for paying for the problems that our current food system are creating. And so many people say like, oh, you'll never like the consumer. The food always gets cheaper. The consumer wants the food to be cheaper. No, we don't see that. We have some customers who are super wealthy and you're like, oh, they're only buying your food because, they can afford it. Plenty of customers who are not super wealthy who just, they want to put more of their food dollars towards this type of food. And that's where this is grassroots and eventually tips the scales. Like one of the challenges to part of this is changing the incentive systems that the federal government has influence over through the Farm Bill. Well, you're looking at one farmer right here, Nick, who he's not voting for more of those same subsidies, and more of the farmers we work with aren't either. And as we grow and have more demand from consumers, then there are more and more farmers who are interested in a different system. So I really think it's grassroots, and it's coming at it from a variety of angles. And the volume of listeners you have in this podcast and people like us shows that it's a growing movement.
I think you're spot on, and that segues really nicely into, if we're trying to grow consumer demand, from the brand perspective, how are you all with your business model, primarily DTC, how are you effectively communicating and reaching that target audience? What sort of value propositions are you going after? Walk us through some of like the brand strategy and the growth strategy for how you're communicating these value propositions to your customers.
Nick, you want to go first?
Yeah, either or. You can go. You can go. I mean, you wax poetic.
I'll go first, then you can shed more light on it. I think so. We've tried a variety of things, and what I mean by that is we've done a lot of digital performance marketing. So we've done some of the Facebook, some of the Instagram, some of the Google search ad search words. We've done some traditional offline activities. We're at some farmers markets here in Chicago. So when we do deliveries in Chicago and Iowa, we do it, and our vans are branded. There's a great marketing stat out there that the average consumer needs to see your brand 7 times before they buy, and it's helpful for them to take in both, some kind of real marketing heavy, click to take action ads, but also some more educational of Nick in the field telling you what regenerative agriculture is. So we've tried to hit it both from a brand level and then a performance level. I think what we're finding is just really authentic personal messages work the best. So 99 counties today, we have 2 core products. We have a membership. That was what we launched first with, which for $99, it used to be. We've now increased the pricing and there's still a lot of demand for it. It's now $199. But when we launched this a year ago for $99, you could get free home delivery and 20% off all the products with that commitment. And mostly from the former Wallace Farms community, we now have about 1,300 people on that product. And since we recently expanded to be national, that product doesn't make sense nationally at that low price point. So we've increased it a bit. That product's still available, but we're really leaning into subscriptions because it is just as much as members love us, they have to remember to order. And there's a convenience and just kind of a better business model subscriptions. So we launched that a month ago. We're now up to like 135 subscribers alongside the membership base. And so anyway, the thing we found most effective is, I would argue, we did these love letters, which is like a form of direct mail, where literally it's basically the story Nick told, the origin story, in a more shortened version. And then they were all addressed and signed individually by Nick. And we sent this out to, a couple thousand people. And that's where most of the current customers came from. And so there are other kind of more mass market channels we're working on now. Like Nick is doing a lot of Instagram videos, which he'll speak to, kind of showing people like the impacts out in the field. So, we've tried a mix of things. Some have worked, some haven't, but we're really finding like just being authentic and connecting with people about the mission, and particularly health. When you survey our customers, the number one reason they buy from us, 55%, is health. Like regenerative, caring about that is more like 25%. So I'll hand it over to Nick to tell you more about kind of what he's been working on.
Yep. No, you're. I mean, just me out in the pastures or just talking about what's really going on. I mean, you always. I think I didn't quite do it as much with the launch, maybe just because we were busy. But I didn't. How much do you want to let people inside on not how the sausage is made, but in a way, right? And I think people want that. I think we're moving into an age, maybe because of the age of Aquarius, but I think people just want to know what's like who people really are. Like what are you really doing? Like right now, I'm looking at a cow right now who probably just gave birth, and I'm seeing some hawks and vultures type, and I'm like, oh, there's probably afterbirth. It's like should go out and shoot that video, right? Because that's what people would want to know. If they're not out here on the farm, and they can't be, you give them a glimpse into it, right? And the other thing is, and we didn't do this right away, and I think that's why we didn't start with subscriptions, because we thought, well, Butcher Box, right? They're doing 500-600 million, and we don't want to be another Butcher Box, but they're successful for a reason, right? They're evoking that they have healthier meat, right? And that they are subscription. It's easy. You set it, forget it. And they give you a little carrot, like some free bacon or salmon or whatever, to sign up. And then people get their products once a month, and they kind of work their lives around that. So we thought, you know what? Do people really know what's going on in Butcher Box? I'm going to pick on them a little bit, right? I did that in a video. It's like, Butcher Box is importing their meat from Cape Grim in Tasmania and some other places. They're working with larger certified organic, but big confinements, right? Big North Carolina organic hen houses that probably have millions of organic birds. Do people know that? Because people are probably thinking, oh, this is coming from small farms. I can assure you that they're not working with any small farms. And I said that about the grocery stores. When you go into grocery stores, you're not gonna maybe a few small brands from small producers, but for the most part, you're just buying corporate feedlot confinement type animals that are bringing you a very consistent product at a low price. So if you don't want that, and here's the reasons, and here's what's that's causing. That's just how we got here. How all of Iowa now is sprayed with chemicals. That is why. So your food dollar, as cliched as it sounds, your food dollar matters. So if we can get enough people to realize that, I don't really want my meat to come from a barge from Australia or in a Canadian confinement, antibiotic and hormone free confined pig operation, then I need somebody to tell me what's going on and why that is even happening. And so I think we're just going to be a little more aggressive, not so much Iowa nice, right? Like, oh, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but it's like, no, we're just going to give it to you how it's really coming down. And I think that's a little bit of the pivot we've made here in the last month or so. And it's just parlaying with the subscriptions, because when I was doing all these deliveries in Chicago and Iowa for all these years, even my best customers, I'd look at, I'm like, gosh, they only ordered 9 out of the 12 months or 10, they'd miss a couple. So I called a few and I said, how come, how could I get you to order every month? They're like, oh, I really want to do, but I was out of town and I couldn't pick it up. And we just got busy. It wasn't that they didn't want the meat. It's just that their life got in the way. So therein lies, if you just ship it to them and they get to kind of pick and choose and curate it a little bit, they're happy and they work their lives around it and they're going to eat the meat, versus trying to make them come to you. And that's where the metropolitan buying clubs kind of failed a little bit. Not failed, but I think other direct marketers that you may have talked to or would echo the same thing. You don't have time to do the farming and go to the soccer and the baseball games and worry about the cold chain. What's my butcher doing? Is he getting it right? How am I going to get it from his place to the freezer? Who's going to pack the orders and who's going to deliver them? Right? Yeah. All of that hard stuff's in the middle. And that was one of the reasons why we started 99 Counties. How can a farmer do all of that and then enjoy a sunset with his or her spouse, and have a beer and then watch the kids play? You can't do all of that. You can get to a certain point, but then you're going to hit a ceiling. And then eventually what you're going to do is you're going to burn out. And I did that for 20 years. And I think I was just like, I can't do this anymore. I need somebody to help me in the middle, but I still need to sell my animals at the gate for a better price. I can't go commodity because I'm not big enough. Yeah. So that's essentially what 99 Counties is doing. We're trying to give farmers a lifeline and a way of life by honoring their work and honoring the animals through the process and creating awesome sausages and products in the middle. And we're trying to get it to people at a somewhat fair price, So that's, kind of the essence of why I wanted to build that, is because I knew that there was hundreds of other farmers, or there was going to be 100 other farmers that were going to try to solve for that. So I'm like, well, let's just do that. So.
Yeah, we've heard that many times, and I've heard it in so many conversations I've had in the space. Is like, we're putting all the financial risk on farmers, and then we're also asking them to be brands and marketers and processors and all the things. And like, something's got to give somewhere. And like, in some places and in some scale that might work. And there's different versions of that and all that.
Yeah, John Kemp. Yeah, I think John Kemp paraphrased that. Maybe it was on your podcast. But yeah.
Yeah. One comment and then a couple questions. So you're good. That like visceral unveiling of the truth, I think, is needed at this point. Like, I really do think we need that. And like, I can just speak for one thing that stands out in my mind is like Smithfield Pork. Seeing the video of the person, like the guy in the plant, exposing that they're literally grinding up like plastic and cardboard and feeding that to the pigs. And when I do go out to like a mainstream restaurant and I'm going to order bacon, like I pause and like, yes, I'm a human and sometimes I still want the bacon and I order it, but like it used to be 100% and now it's significantly less than that, because I'm thinking like, shit, this pig ate like ground up white bread packaging, right? That it was fed, and like the video went viral on TikTok. And so there's different levels of that, but like I do think that's going to be rather important for us to, I think, expose like what is actually going on mainstream versus what the folks like y'all are doing. There's two pieces of curiosity I think would be very interesting to the audience. One is probably a little simpler and one's a little more complex. And it's, as a business, we have so many retail focused brands on here. As a business, you're talking about the sticks. We know you're selling all these awesome whole animal cuts. We know there's this whole carcass utilization component. Like, how does product development play into your long-term strategy, right? And then really, as the aggregator, as the brand, as the person maybe taking advantage of or being responsible for the processing, like I'd love if y'all can give a little more B2B kind of context on like what all that goes into: managing, the timing of the slaughter of the animals, managing shelf life, managing whole carcass utilization, managing shipping, and probably the inflation, the inflationary environment there. So really just would love to hear y'all talk about product development strategy and really like the back end guts of the business and how that affects how you go to market, how you interact with the customer.
I'll go with one quick really important thing, and then I'll let Nick take over. In a whole animal carcass utilization model, and I'll, for the rest of the audience, talk about that, right? So a lot of the other meat marketplaces, or like places you're going to buy a steak or a meat subscription from, they're buying from a farmer widgets of what they need. Like, oh, I have this much demand for ribeyes, and they buy this many ribeyes from the farmer and then sell it. We don't do that, because that is exactly part of the problem, where the farmer then literally, because what's in more high demand are steaks, has to find a home for all this ground beef and can't get it at a high enough price. And like, that's why this whole model breaks. And so, one of the biggest challenges for businesses like ours, so when we contract directly with farmers, we buy the whole cow, we buy the whole pig, we buy the whole chicken, et cetera. And then it's on us to create value-added products and make sure that we make a sustainable margin out of that. The thing that typically kills companies in trying to do what we're trying to do is not being able to find a home for enough of the ground beef, for example, at a high enough price point. And that's one of the great secrets to the business, is Nick's creative genius around the sticks product. And that's why we have that product along. You could argue they're kind of two different businesses, but we really think they augment each other, because eventually the sticks can be omni-channel and kind of create brand awareness for the direct-to-consumer product. But we have this incredible grass-fed, grass-finished beef, completely sugar-free beef stick, and a hot honey pork and a honey pork. And we don't think anyone else is doing a hot honey pork. And this is like, Nick's next greatest hit. And those really help us from a carcass utilization standpoint. So I think that's a pretty key part of it.
What comes to mind too, Christian, for me is like, coming from the distribution space, your best customer is your current customer. So if you're already sending something there and you have a distribution cost that's X and you're sending them X amount of product, adding to that is your most profitable new business, right? Because you're just making the business you have more profitable. And so you can only eat so many ribeyes. Like, you can only cook so much ground beef. And so when I think about increasing basket size, if I'm y'all, like, that's the best lever you got, is like, snack sticks on the go versus having to cook the ground beef or whatever that, might be.
Yeah, let me give you the perfect world. If I had an investor that really got it, right? We're in it for the long haul.
Mm-hmm.
You take the animal, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have key processors.
Mm-hmm.
You got the hide. There's no reason we shouldn't have artists out there making leather goods. And that's starting to happen, right? I mean, I think Jim Kleinschmidt and, like Timberland. I mean, there's people that are working on that, right? Then you have the bones that people might make their own, but I would create actually almost a nonprofit. Like we have so many chicken backs, right? Everybody loves chicken breasts and thighs, but you have chicken backs. I would love to have a little bit of fuel to do a nonprofit where we're actually feeding people in need bone broth and soups from bone broth, right? That is low hanging fruit, and that is a win-win. Then you have all the little tendons and the weird parts. That is either dehydrated or ground up for pets. We know how much people spend on their pets, right? You're value adding that. And then the rest is the steaks aren't hard to sell and the roast, and we can work all into these value added products. But like you said, you could have an awesome lineup of cured sticks and summer sausage and Landjager and all these, jerkies and biltong that could go out into Whole Foods and Trader Joe's and all these places that we could still make enough of a margin and have it be a volume game. But all the other stuff would maybe be sold directly through D2C. So I see you can jump in and out of both of those. But there is a pathway to utilize the whole animal, let people know what you're doing with that whole animal. And wouldn't people want to support when they're in Whole Foods next? Because they're going to pick up salt and oils and whatever else that they can't get from their farmer. Yeah. They could buy their snack sticks there, or they put it on a subscription, or they buy summer sausage or whatever great products we can partner with our provisions people. But wouldn't they want to spend $10 a month too? To feed kids and schools with like real food. Have you ever looked into school lunch programs? I mean, so anyway, I dream about these things, but it's like, it just takes time and money, right? But.
Well, and I just want to add to that, like all the things Nick described, you guys have probably, some of the listeners may have seen these great stats when people are like, oh, animal agriculture is, so terrible. Well, today, even in the commodity system, everything gets used. I mean, it's very efficient. Every single component of those animals gets used. The problem is today in the commodity system, where you have 40 beef processing plants in the U.S. processing 90% of the volume of the animals, it's all in a commoditized system where the farmer gets completely lost. And that's why there's no interest in how exactly was the farmer raising these animals. And that's why there's no premium paid for it. And so we're, to be clear, the commoditized system does do a good job of realizing value out of these products, but you have no idea where that hide ended up, and there's no honoring of the story and no interest in it. And so when we sell our products, and this is an evolution, the package, as much as we can, contains the county or the name of the farmer where it came from, and eventually we want a barcode where you can see a video of Nick talking to you. And it's an evolution, but that's really we see ourselves as it's an interesting dichotomy because so many people want to think they can buy just from the one farmer. And that's what Nick was speaking to earlier. We're that's not sustainable for the one farmer. As I did that road trip in the past and tried to figure out what business to build, time and time again, farmers would say to me, I would love to do regenerative agriculture. Someone just has to pay me enough. And so we view it as our job to take the risk of paying more, 99 counties paying more to the farmers we work with for doing things in a regenerative fashion, and then telling that story to the customer such that the customer can pay a slight premium to make that whole system viable.
I think you're spot on, and I want to go macro and then drill down to a specific question. And I think that right now, culturally in the United States, there are a few different things happening at the same time. One is the decommercialization of food in general. Think back 10 years ago where Cheesecake Factory, Starbucks, these massive chains were the leaders in their industries. And I think we're starting to see more of a resurgence and more support towards independent regenerative restaurants, right? And so that's part one. Part two, that leads to the decommoditization of many things, including the meats and the systems that you just identified really well, Christian. And that leads to a third part of this process, the decentralization of food. And it requires consumers, it's a lot more time, energy, bandwidth to try to understand, okay, like if I'm not going to trust whoever, Whole Foods, meat case, butcher to say my meat's good enough, I then have to understand who I'm buying from, what their unique value proposition is, etc. And part of the puzzle here is certifications or verifications. So in lieu of having to go through, I understand, every single farm, every single thing I purchase from all these direct farmers, that takes a lot of time and bandwidth for the consumer. The certification serves as a, this certification is good enough for me. I can buy anything with this cert. So you guys are in kind of a unique position right now because you do so much direct business with your consumers. I feel like the certifications are probably not critically important right now. But as we talk about the future in the meat sticks and Whole Foods and retail, et cetera, how are you guys feeling about the certification space today? Are there any certs that you think are doing really great? Is that something that's potentially on the horizon in your future? What do you think?
I'll go first. I'll let you go, Nick.
The shit-eating grin on Nick's face. Oh, I can't wait.
Well, I think we've historically been self-certified, and yeah, we found like we did a bunch of surveying of customers, and they just more like when we started this thing, and a lot of them were just like, "Look, I trust Nick, and I like that's all kind of I need." I think the certifications really make sense in retail because of the fact that in retail you generally don't know where it's coming from, and so that's like they transfer that credibility theoretically. And I think just briefly, like what we've done, I just saw a post by I think it's Paul Lightfoot at Patagonia, who's a really impressive individual, about how much the ROC, regenerative organic certification, is growing. That boggles our minds because every farmer we talk to is like, it's too hard, can't do it, doesn't make sense. And that always makes me want to do it. Like, oh, we should do that. But I think, and you guys may have more of a point of view on this, but as I understand it, the ROC really hasn't made much traction in livestock. I've seen a little bit of it in and around eggs and stuff, but really I don't think it caters well to livestock, and that's the feedback we get from farmers. And so we've actually recently joined the Savory program and Land to Market. And we think they have the best holistic way of doing ecological outcome verifications. Yeah. And on one of your guys' podcasts recently made the good point, like, what does EOV mean to the average consumer? Fair point. What it means for us is eventually we hope to direct to consumer value add and have a home for our hides, for example. But like, we're not, Nick could get real excited and probably come up with a like leather boot company in a day. Yeah, like that's a town of his. That's a bridge too far for us today. So if we can have that certification, that allows us to have access to a channel that allows us to get more value for the whole carcass utilization. So that's why we've decided to go the route we've gone. But Nick's really dealt with this for a much longer time and directly as a farmer. So he'll take it away.
The grin was more like you just see so much greenwashing, and it's just like. Yeah. Again, not being authentic and kind of getting outflanked. I mean, the reason we chose, we're just starting the path, literally just starting with Land to Market and Savory. Because how do you not watch Alan Savory's TED Talk from 10 years ago and have your entire brain explode that like, well, why don't we just do that? Right? Now, do they need more fuel and more ambassadors? And, I wish I could go on their team and run, and just be like, preach it. So I don't know if they need to set up at every farmer's market and because nobody knows, right? Like they only have so much time and resources and budget, but it's like, and is regenerative, like, I don't know, is that the best word? Maybe it's what we have. It's like, what else are you going to call it? Organic. You can't call organic's toast. I mean, it is, but it isn't, right? Like I'm still going to get an organic tortilla chip because I half trust it. Mm-hmm. But again, it's like trust and authenticity. And I'm not naive enough to think that when 99 counties becomes to a certain point, like, could we be not corruptible, but how do we know we're doing what we're saying and we're actually following through? So there does have to be a third party, but I've followed Rodell. I love what Rodell does. I mean, Land to Market and Savory's great. I just feel like somebody needs to catch a break, or we all just need to. I think this is the messy middle. I don't have an answer. I'm probably just going to sputter around in circles, but we just have to have a clear message to the people, and I don't know if it's Super Bowl ads or what, but we need to just have people understand we're trying to make the soil better, and the soil's about gone here, folks. It's dirt, right? Like 50 years of blasting this and extracting is a problem. And that's why we have 49 out of 50 in Iowa for cancer. So I don't know if I answered the question or just created more questions, but
Nick, man, I love the way your brain works, man, and the way you talk. You know, you're a dreamer. I love the Super Bowl commercials. I love James Earl Jones narrating something. You know, I think it's awesome, and I think
it's right.
The sputtering may seem like sputtering, but to me, it's the perfect answer in the fact that it's so confusing and difficult right now to decide for a brand. To your point, you know, EOV is fantastic for verifying that the practices are good, that you're actually making positive improvements over time. Do the consumers really understand it today? No. Will that change over time? Hopefully. You know, and that change won't happen unless more people who are doing the right thing start to buy into that system. So just want to comment on that. AC, I feel like I keep hogging the mic. I feel like you got a question primed. Go for it, man.
No, you're good, man. It comes back to something we've talked about a lot on the show, which is just we're not turning regenerative claims into consumer-facing purchasing triggers. That's it. That's the whole problem. We've designed the entire system around a B2B perspective to all feel good about being regenerative enough and, you know, crossing our T's and dotting our I's. But at the end of the day, the consumer walks into the grocery store and we have to design for that experience and the purchasing triggers and the psychology of that. So Kyle and I are working on something there. But that's the larger issue. And so I think that leads into a good question around, like, as y'all look to grow this thing, like what really moves the needle? Like you've mentioned some marketing strategies. We've talked about working with the farmers, but like, what does the path to growth really look like? And what are those key unlocks? Like, talk to us there.
Well, one point on,
I'm sure it's a chicken and egg thing, not a chicken or egg thing. So I'm sure it's a long list.
well, just to put a, just to put a
period.
period on this last thought though, it's like, it's confusing because I don't know when this is going to air, but you know, we're trying to figure out like, should I go out to RFSI and what would I say and who would I say it to? Like, is that who I should be speaking with or talking to? I mean, I know that's the fuel, that's the cash, that's the energy, but you know, does that move the needle with consumers? So anyway, I just like, how many other people are feeling that in this space, like as a farmer, but also as the marketer and the business in the middle of this, like, you know, am I going to have the right audience to grab that fuel to come home to do more of this? So anyway, I just wanted to, go ahead.
Can I just respond to that really, really quick? I think it's the right question and it's a super fair question. And I think a lot of people feel that way. And what I see in my lived experience as an investor in the space is we are just as capital constrained and as constrained generally as the operators we're trying to fund. So it's really not a question of want to and why. It's that, especially as a professional fund manager and especially as an emerging manager, you are very beholden to certain standard operating procedures, metrics, et cetera. And you have to earn the right to innovate in terms of how you operate. And unfortunately, we don't have time for that, but that is the way that system works. That isn't true for everyone. You know, more of your family office type investors have a lot more flexibility and there's a lot of really cool innovative work being done. But like the entire ecosystem is still incredibly underfunded. And that's, you know, it's a whole bigger issue.
I appreciate it. And I'm glad I said something to have you clarify that too. You know, where do we see ourselves going? I mean, it's still so simple in my mind and I romanticize it probably too much. And then, you know, life beats me up on it. But is it just simply creating a movement of people throwing a subscription of snack sticks worth $100 or a $200 meat a month in their cart and just having it show up? And when that 99 counties box or bag shows up on their door, it's not just like, oh, well, that's my, you know, razors or my whatever the hell else they get, right?
Yeah.
That box shows up and they go, those guys are I'm helping those guys change agriculture. Like we're a sick nation, and it's my part. I'm just like, and when I open the box, I'm always like happy. Like there's always something in that box that's going to nourish this family, and it comes down to energy, right? Like that they gave me their energy. That it just happened to be in form of a digit, right? It used to be cash, but now we're just digits. Like that energy to us is we take our little bit in the middle to keep going, and then we pass that energy to the farmer. The farmer's giving all of that energy to his or her land, and then that energy's like, right, the cycle of it. To me, I don't think about it as money anymore. It's about energy. And so I want people, when that box shows up on their doorstep, that they are proud, they feel great. Now, can we do that? Do we just keep beating the drum and that keeps happening? Could we catch a little lightning in the bottle with the right ad, or the right media company, or the investors like, oh, we can create that. Like, we can do a song that create, he's a native Hawaiian guy that did a song that I'll send it to you, that had people like passing the this like sign that says change, making change or something. It was a cool viral video, and I thought, you never know when you're gonna your little match is gonna start a fire, right? So I think we're close. I mean, I keep pressing that to like, what's it gonna be? And maybe you can't force it, but I think I think if you just build the right vehicle and you're ready for that moment, then then it can happen. Like, right? What is the saying about you're not lucky? You need some luck, but you have to be prepared or in the right place for when luck finds you. I'm butchering that.
Right. Luck is where hard work
That's
meets
so
opportunity.
what I wanted to say, which is you guys are. This is my wavelength. Well, here, say it again, Kyle, and then I'll say what I was going to say.
Luck is where hard work meets opportunity.
So I used to, my first job out of college, I worked at an investment bank. I'd been a history major, had literally no idea what I was doing. And I used to have this quote on a sticky note on my computer, and it was from Michael Bloomberg, and it was something like, I don't remember it exactly, but it's like, the harder you work, the luckier you get, right? It's like luck is hard work, sweat, something or other. Anyway, long story short, it was like, hey, if you're there first and out of the office last, like you have more exposure to luck finding you. And so, like, how I would tie that back to what we're doing is working hard and trying new things. Like, we are growing, not as fast as we want to, but each new initiative we try brings more opportunity. And like, you've got to create a fantastic customer experience so that those customers refer more people. We have incredible products. I mean, we have like 100 SKUs. And I have the privilege, all of our employees, we get some free meat every month. We have some like ground pork products that'll just like literally blow your brain. And I had the first one for the first time recently. And so we have all these amazing products, and it's just people tasting them and then having a good customer experience. If you have an issue with your order, it's Nick's sister, literally, who is customer service, who's very Iowa nice, and who will deal with you, who will help you out. And I'll just give you an example of like the hard work required to get luckier and to do better. My uncle placed an order. He's in Connecticut. We recently expanded nationally because we love the local milkman style deliveries we do, but our number one initiative is to change the acres and have more of the land and more of the people be regenerated. And so if that means being national, that makes more sense, right? Because more demand. My uncle got a skirt steak and ended up sending me a message like, hey, this was a little tough. Like, maybe I should have marinated it first. And I was like, oh my God, our skirt steak is my favorite product. It's in my fridge right now, in my favorite marinade. And if you do my favorite marinade and the right chimichurri with it, there's literally nothing better in this world. But why on earth didn't we have that recipe with it, or like let him know that? And so like, those are the little things that we have to keep working harder on to do better, so that we can continue to grow and have more opportunities to get lucky.
I love that. And the proof's in the pudding. You talked about something earlier, the direct mailer marketing really caught my attention. It resonated with me because that's not something that people do anymore. So you really are trying new things and building that authentic experience to gain customer acquisition. And I think that's something that's, out of all the CPG brands I've worked for or with, I've never heard of somebody doing a handwritten direct mailer for customer acquisition, and it seems to be super, like, it works, right? So that's really interesting. Also, just before we wrap, I want to touch on one other thing. Nick, I think you mentioned earlier, like a unified voice around the regenerative movement. What AC and I talk about a lot and on a lot of different episodes is what those value propositions should be. And Christian, you mentioned it earlier. I think you said 55% of your consumers purchase 99 Counties products because of the health benefits, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And this is something I think that the regenerative movement needs to coalesce around right now. There's regenerative, its blessing and curse is the fact that there are so many different marketable attributes, right? There's reducing carbon dead zones, there's carbon sequestration, there's, water retention rates, there's cooling the planet. There's so many different things, improving biodiversity. But the thing consumers care about the most is themselves. And if we as a movement can start with that value proposition first, I think that's how we coalesce around a unified message. And that's what should be out in the Super Bowl. Like, that's the ad,
Yeah, we listened to prep for this, Nick and I, to the Singing Pastures episode from a few weeks ago. And one of the founders there was saying how she has learned to say, that the value prop is this, and then just stop talking. And we struggle with that because I always want to be like, this is a 10 double bottom line business. Like, we're better for your health. We're better for the land. We're better for the communities. We're better for the end. Like, just stop. But it's hard not to because there are so many benefits.
Right. When you're a regen nerd, you're a regen nerd. You can't stop talking about it. I say it's sort of like being like a CrossFitter or a vegan. It's like, how do you know somebody's into CrossFit or vegan? It's like, they'll tell you. Same thing with regen. Like we can't shut up about it.
Yeah. And I think it's like that top of funnel customer interaction we need to improve, but I still am so bullish on the product, and the eating experience should be so much better, and the person should feel so much better that your repeat purchase percentage should be way higher than conventional peers, right? And not getting paid to say this, like this is just a straight up true anecdote. My buddy Eric, he lives in Lincoln Park. He's a relatively new 99 Counties customer, sends me a voice note right after he starts. He's like, bro, best bacon I've ever had. I can't wait to buy my Thanksgiving turkey. My whole family's coming into town. We're going to crush a 99 Counties bird for Thanksgiving. And it's just like, he's really into regen and he gets it and he's very into health, right? So he's like the perfect target consumer, but unprompted, hit me up just to evangelize and be like, hey, such an amazing eating experience. Like, I'm in, right? And like the retention rate and the lifetime value of that person now is just going to be astronomically higher, I think, than a lot of your, competitive set. It's just, how do you get those people in the door? How do you get the bacon in their mouth, right? Like that's the trick.
Yeah. Only a matter of time.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Last question that we take it home with every time, which I think we've been answering this question the whole time, but I'll just use it as the table setter for kind of closing thoughts. What are we going to have to do to have regen brands have 50% market share by 2050? What do we need to do, fellas? So really, like all food, 50% of all food be regenerative by 2050.
I'll go first, then you go, Nick. Mine's really quick. Everyone listening to this, sign up for 99 Counties today. You are supporting small farmers in Iowa. You are changing the world. You can see so many videos of what we're actually doing. Nick is right there, boots on the ground. So we've got the meat sticks. We've got the meat subscription bundles. Just come to us and join the movement. So that's what I would say. Your turn, Nick.
Love it.
Can I ask a question with a question? Answer a question with a question?
Sure.
Does the answer have to rely on politicians and people at the FDA, USDA, and EPA?
There's no right or wrong answer, brother. It's whatever's on your heart and mind.
Well, let's just reform. Well, if we can reform that, it'd be easier to get to 2050. Yeah. I'll give you a really simple one, and I don't know. We're going to have a 4 split screen, but will people be able to see this?
Hopefully.
Maybe.
Yes.
People are listening. Okay, I'm going to describe this. Right?
Yeah, good idea.
Because people, okay. So I'm up in my loft here. This is actually where I started on December 21st, the first day of Aquarius. I did that video that Christian saw, and I specifically put it out at that date and time because I knew the ripple effect would be the most. Yeah. But this photo I'm showing is one that I took shortly thereafter that. It's in May. It's on my farm. My farm's on the right. My neighbor's is on the left. Mm-hmm. In May. And my farm has everything growing. I have a border with like legumes, grasses, flowers starting, all of it. And then I have an oat field that's growing with clover in it also. And on the others is a field that used to be in beans and it's going to corn and it's dead as a doorknob and nothing's growing in May. Mm-hmm. And when I was driving on my farm, I stopped and that hit me like a sledgehammer between the eyes because I will say, we have to pick a side. You have got, you have to pick a side. Mm-hmm. We're either going to do, as Gabriel Brown said, you either wake up in the morning and we're going to figure out what we're going to make live and thrive and be more beautiful and nourish us, or you're going to pick a side and say, what am I going to kill today? And in the regen movement, we know that there are alternative views about killing things with herbicide just because we need a cover crop. And so, yeah. So I would just say, if we all pick a side today, we'll get there before 2050. So.
I love that pick a side comment with the photo attached to it. That was powerful. Want to make sure that anybody listening knows where to find your product. That's the number 9 counties.com. Is that correct? Cool. 99counties.com. I, for one, after AC's testimonial, I didn't even think about Thanksgiving bird, but I will absolutely be buying a 99 Counties turkey for Thanksgiving this year. Super pumped about that. Thank you guys so much for being on the pod. Really enjoyed this episode. I love all the work you guys are doing in Iowa, man. Really, really great stuff.
Can't thank you guys enough. I mean, every conversation we can have, I think we added energy that we needed today. That's the important thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys.
Appreciate y'all.
All right. Be well.
For show notes, episode transcripts, and more information on our guests and what we discuss on the show, check out our website, regen-brands.com. That is regen-brands.com. You can also find our Regen recaps on the website. Regen recaps take less than 5 minutes to read and cover all the key points of the full hour-long conversations. You can check out our YouTube channel, Regen Brands Podcast, for all of our episodes with both video and audio. The best way to support our work is to give us a 5-star rating on your favorite podcast platform, subscribe to future episodes, and share the show with your friends. Thanks for tuning in to the Regen Brands Podcast, brought to you by the Regen Coalition and Outlaw Ventures. We hope you learned something new in this episode, and it empowers you to use your voice, your time, and your dollars to help us build a better and more regenerative food system. Love you guys.